Welcome to the North Hills Church podcast, where we take a deeper dive into unique content created just for you. I'm Ryan Ferguson, one of the pastors at North Hills Church, and I am excited that we are in week 3 of this special follow-up to our sermon series, this series of podcasts where we're going a little bit deeper into being serpents and doves. And if you've not been able to join us, what we mean by that is Jesus gave these words to his disciples: I'm sending you out as sheep among wolves, and I want you to be as harmless as doves and wise as serpents. And we're taking that image that Jesus gave, that image of how we are supposed to navigate life, how we're supposed to be wise and be both shrewd and kind at the same time. How do we exercise that wisdom in this particular cultural moment in Greenville, South Carolina, with all that's going on and all that's going on in our country? So we tackled wisdom week 1. Week 2, we talked about response to COVID-19 as the church. And this week, we're going to jump into the topics, plural, of politics and social media. So I'm excited to have several guests with me today. We're going to take a moment to get to know them just a little bit. To my left is Lacey Cagley. Hey, Lacey.
Hi.
Thanks for coming in.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
How long have you been around North Hills?
About 13 years.
What do you do?
I raise kids and I write for a blog, so every day, and then Travelers Rest Here, a social media format for the town of TR.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I live in Travelers Rest. Very thankful
great
for that.
place.
How many kids?
I have 6.
Awesome.
Yeah.
We were just talking a little bit before about raising teenagers, and so we're both in that same sphere of life.
Yes.
To even further left is Justin Pidcock.
Hello, hello.
Justin, let everybody know what it is that you do around here. Justin actually works for the church.
Yeah, so I am the communications director here at North Hills, and I handle all the need-to-know stuff and just trying to help make sure that people know what to do, where to go, and how to find information.
So for all of that, you can blame Justin if you
yes.
don't know. Justin, how long have you been around North Hills?
About the same as Lacey, about 13 years.
A little bit about your family.
So I've got 2 boys, and they are wonderful. I've got a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old. So
Awesome.
They teach me lots of things.
That's great. And Morgan?
Yes, my wife, Morgan, and she is very busy helping them grow and learn lots of things as well. So,
and then even to my farthest left is Mr. Matt Nesberg. I threw in a Mr. there just to be kind.
Thank you. Appreciate that. The respect.
The respect, yes. Yeah. So, Matt, tell us a little bit about yourself. How long have you been around North Hills?
About 21 years, 22 years.
Yep. And what do you get to do? Matt is also on staff.
So I serve as one of the pastors here, the pastor of counseling here. I'm married to Katie. We have 3 kids. I'm a serpent. She's a dove. So that works out well.
Yeah.
We were thinking about that Sunday. And our kids are 14, 12, and 10.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So it's kind of fun for me on this end as we approach, again, this topic of politics and social media, that we just engage in a conversation with people from different walks of life who do different things, but coming back to trying to centralize it on this theme that Peter brought out of James this past week, that wisdom is both doing the right thing. James says, let wisdom be evidenced by your good works, but let those good works be done in the right way. So it's the right truth, the right thing, but it's done in the right way. And the way James says that is in the meekness of wisdom. So we're going to kind of take that idea, do the right thing, do the true thing in the right way, and kind of ask kind of a big question about politics and just see what happens to the conversation. So my question is, with wisdom on our minds, navigating life, right way, right truth, serpent, dove, what does heavenly wisdom say about Republicans and Democrats being in the same church? Or to add another label, since we love labels for everything, what do you do with a progressive and a conservative in the same church? And I'm not asking you to declare what you are on that spectrum as much as it is, what does wisdom say about that? What's your perspective on it? So what are your thoughts?
Who wants to jump in?
No, I can go first.
All right.
No, I think one of the big things that jumped out to me was actually from the service this last Sunday, in that it's about assuming the best in someone. And it's really easy to do that with people that you know well. So like I know some people well that I work with that we're going to disagree on things politically, but I know that they have a really good heart. They love people, and they're trying to really improve it, if that makes sense. So I think it's easy to do it with them, but on social media or wherever, a lot of times if we don't know the person, it's a lot harder for me to just kind of establish that trust and come to it with a good assumption.
Yeah, I think that the word that comes to me a lot is just relationship. You know, I think just like you said, if you know someone, you're much more likely to be willing to give them, you know, a little grace or whatever it is. And so I think having that relationship with a lot of people that maybe aren't just like you would go a long way. And then also giving people the benefit of the doubt until you acquire that relationship, or maybe even if you have someone whose views feel very different from yours, actually taking the time to develop a relationship with them, to actually get to know them and see beyond just the quick labels or the way that you think that they are.
Yep.
That's great. So I'll just kind of reiterate in short, like assuming the best of someone who might differ, whether I know them or just in general. And then this idea of relationship, I think that's a great word, that we have that with some people. And we choose to have a relationship with people that we do disagree with. Like that, I think for me, that was really impactful. There's a choice being made there. Not only do I put up with you or roll my eyes at your ideas, no, I actually want to engage you and have a relationship that might supersede our differences. Matt, you have any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I was just going to say Peter cited the David French article where he kind of showed how Republicans and Democrats view each other in the extreme. That we have a tendency to think the worst. The exact opposite. 1 Corinthians 13 says for those who are in Christ, our calling is to think the best, to believe that what is good about them, and so the move of the culture is not Christian in this way. The move of the culture is exactly against what the clear teaching of Scripture is, which is the culture wants us to think the worst, to villainize, to talk about how they hate America, whichever side it is. The other side hates America worse than, or whatever else. And instead of, from the Christian perspective, realizing that there are Christians on left or right of center, and the Bible tells us clearly how to view those people with humility and grace and love towards them, believing the best.
Mm-hmm.
So a couple things. For those of you who may not have seen the sermon yet, that there is a striking illustration that Peter gives at the beginning that it would be available on our website. It would come up as a graphic where the Republicans and Democrats were asked to identify what they thought about the other party positively and negatively, and it was astounding. Like 86% of Republicans think Democrats are brainwashed. And the exact same thing is true on the other side of the aisle, so to speak. So if you check out our sermon, look for that moment early in Peter's introduction. It'll help you frame Matt's comment. I'd like to go into one thing you said, Matt, where people will say what other people believe. Like wisdom doesn't say what someone else believes. It doesn't villainize them. So you use the illustration of, well, they hate America. And then you were going to keep saying other things and you stopped. Or you hate America and then you stopped. I don't think wisdom does that. I don't think wisdom villainizes someone else, even when we strongly disagree. Or even when we strongly disagree on a true moral thing, we still don't go to that realm of you hate that attitude. And so anyway, I just wanted to kind of highlight that one little moment of what you said of how powerful that is. If I hear myself villainizing somebody, I am probably not operating in wisdom. Mm-hmm. Is that fair? Mm-hmm. Out of that one point you were talking about?
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
Any other thoughts there at all? Anyone? So what about, and maybe we could come up with some off the top of our head. What do we do? So we're gonna now take what you guys just said, and we would believe those two people, however they identify themselves on a spectrum of Republican, Democrat, conservative, progressive, could be in the same body and are in the same body here, quite frankly. What do we do with different political opinions on solving cultural issues? So it might be that we want to test case a cultural issue or raise a cultural issue. We could do that. Like, I'm going to come at it from this direction. I'm going to come at it from this direction. Again, we're both Christians. What would wisdom have us do in one of those moments? Does that make sense?
I think it makes sense, and I think it'd be fun to maybe pick one, but I also think the first thing I think wisdom does that as parents we forget, I know as a mom of 6 kids I forget all the time, is I think we close our mouths. We listen. And I think we don't do that first. I think it's why we shoot off text in a hurry and we shoot off comments in a hurry. And we, as a friend or not a friend is commenting their opinion, we're already ready with ours. Like we've got like that one ready instead of just being like, let's wait for a minute, I'll just listen to what you're saying. And I'd rather be known as that person. I'm probably not always known as that person who just listens well. But I think that's that first mark of loving Jesus in that situation is just stop and listen. Just listen.
I like to call it intense curiosity. It's like
talk more about that.
It's exactly what you're talking about, Lacey. And this, it's instead of being so quick to speak into something, to share your thoughts on it, and you just want to keep talking and convince the other person or whatever. It's a genuine and intense curiosity that all you care about is understanding what they're trying to say. Mm-hmm. Like, let me hear what you're saying, repeat it back to you in a different language, like have a real conversation. And it should be obvious to that person that I don't really care about what you think my point of view is. I just want to know what you have to say and understand your perspective.
So wisdom listens, wisdom is curious. I would add to yours that wisdom does that if it's sincere. Like it's not asking. A friend of mine years ago used this phrase, and I've used it a ton. It's not an intellectually dishonest question. Meaning, I'm not asking this question to get you to say something so that I can then pounce.
Right.
Intense wisdom, curiosity is, I really do want to hear from you. I value you as a person first, as an image bearer, as potentially another member in my body. So therefore, I'm curious about what you have to say. So I would just add that sincerity to intense curiosity.
Sorry, one more thing on that.
Yeah.
Where I've practiced that before, I've actually learned and realized, oh, like you have a really good point there. And sometimes I'll actually like come over to their side on the issue because their argument was so crystal clear. But if you don't go into it with that mentality, you're not open to those things.
You were going to say something, Matt?
Yeah, I was just going to say, Jesus Christ was the personification of wisdom. The Proverbs, the way it describes wisdom, is how Jesus lived. And so Paul helps us out a little bit in Philippians 2. If Jesus is the personification of wisdom and we're going for wisdom, Paul says in Philippians 2 at the beginning, he says, have this mind in you, which was also in Christ Jesus. So he connects it to Jesus. And what does he say? He says, his command is to consider others more important than yourselves. Mm-hmm. How would that change our conversations as Christians if you look on the other side of center politically? If I'm on right of center and I'm looking at left of center, and my default is consider them more important than myself? What would that change? I mean, to me, that if we look at that as wisdom, if my thinking is, as this person's talking, I'm not preparing my defense and I can't wait till they take a breath and so I can go, oh yeah, but rather I'm going, I need to consider this person more important than what I just know is right or the right perspective. I don't mean right morally, I mean the correct perspective. And so I can listen, as Lacey said, and as Justin said too, without that posture of defensiveness, but one of that says, I'm going to consider you more important than me.
It would change everything.
It would change.
I mean, I want to go get that tattooed. I want to remind myself of that one. Yeah.
It's so hard, though. It's so hard to do.
It's so hard. And I think sometimes what it means is when you're listening, you're actively listening, you're curious, and you're considering them. I think what it might mean is when you're done with that conversation and it's your turn to talk, you actually don't have anything to say. Maybe you just don't get in a comment that time, which for some of us is real hard. But maybe that's the thing. Like, you're like, well, I heard that. and I don't have something back for that right now. And maybe that would also be such a gift to that person who feels like they're about to be attacked by you, and instead they're like, oh, they're going to think about what I said. To feel heard, like you're talking about, would be huge, I think.
You establish a lot of trust in that relationship when you do that. And then that's the person that's going to come back to you and want to talk more. And it's crazy how much that can really improve a relationship.
For sure.
There's an interesting piece. I just got to sit and listen to all of that. And if you have reflections on this, I'd love to hear it. But my observation about everything you just said is that for us to exercise wisdom on both of these questions we just dealt with, you actually have to do preparatory work on your own. Like you actually have to have taken time to, I'm going to listen, I'm going to be curious, I'm going to think of them as more important than my own. Like in very practical, mundane, pre-conversation, I'm telling and teaching and discipling myself, hey, when I meet with someone like that, this is what I'm going to do. Because I don't know, I think each of you might have used some word like default. I don't know that our default, especially those of us who love to debate, I'll throw myself in there. My default is not to do these things. I've got very other fleshly defaults, but it's almost like wisdom says you have to prep first. So I would offer that as an additional insight. Wisdom in solving cultural issues when we differ is doing prep work coming in to be ready. And then Justin, I did want to comment on one thing you said. You changed. You have to be humble.
Yeah.
I'll listen to you. Anyway, any other thoughts? You might have had other thoughts coming into this when we invited you in on kind of wisdom, politics, serpents and doves. Anything you want to say on that topic?
I was just going to say with what you just said that Paul, I think it's Paul Tripp that uses the idea of an inner defense attorney, an inner lawyer that we all have that wants to just rise up and we don't even have to cue him up. Like when we feel like somebody's attacking or that we need to make our case, he's ready to go. He's ready to stand up and argue for it. And it takes some work to take that lawyer off retainer and pursue humility, like you said. Any
other thoughts on politics? We're going to transition to social media for a little bit, but if you brought something in or had another thought, I mean, there's lots of ways we could go on this. Justin, anything?
Oh, you could tell I had something, but I didn't know if I wanted to say it. No, I think one word that maybe didn't come up while we were talking about it, for me would be self-awareness. So it is hard, like what you were describing, it is hard when you're in the moment and you're like you said, lawyer wants to come out and defend, but you have to have a self-awareness of, this is a moment where I might lash out and I need to work really hard not to do that. I mean, it's just like with my relationship with my wife, Morgan, I have to work hard at that because my default, like what you said, is I'm going to defend myself. I'm going to try to make myself look better, worry about what she thinks of me or what other people think. So,
aware of your own weaknesses in these moments. This came from a conversation that Justin and I had. I would just offer too on this political realm and wisdom. I think a context and where you have to exercise this too is family. We've kind of put it in church world mostly, and that's valid, and hopefully that applies to many families too. But I imagine exercising wisdom within family and politics is another interesting area. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I don't know if this is exactly a thought on that, but I think it goes along with it. And you mentioned, as you were listening to us, how, you were talking about we have to do the work beforehand, like we have to think beforehand. And I think any topic we talk about, and today, of course, it's politics and social media, whatever work we've done beforehand is what's going to come out. My mom had printed in the front of her Bible, I think it was a quote from, maybe Corey ten Boom, I can't remember, but something like a cup full of sweetness, brimful of sweetness can only spill out sweetness. And I think we've all heard the analogy of a tea bag in boiling water, whatever is already in you is going to come out. So if you're living a whole life that is antagonistic and, ready to fight or whatever, when you're in these discussions, that's what's going to come. And so I think probably a key overarching over all these conversations is the work we're all doing individually in our own lives and hearts is always going to come out in our conversations, in the way we parent, the way we talk to that person on Facebook, the way we have a quick conversation in the store, how quickly we flare up in anger at the person in front of us who's taking too long. So I think, like most things, all this work begins at home in your heart. That's the start of it all.
Well put. Well put. So let's transition a little bit here and talk again. Same main idea: right thing, a right way, good works within meekness of wisdom and social media, and really start big. Like, what are compelling reasons for a follower of Jesus to be part of social media?
Such a good question.
Yeah, start big.
I think the first big thing that pops in my mind is it is a powerful platform. It gives certain power to an individual that maybe they didn't have pre-social media. Just the platform to speak to so many people, and with that there comes responsibility and power. So I think when that can be used in a good way, that can have a great impact on fellow Christians, not just them, but also unbelievers. We get to live life to a certain degree in front of people on social media based on how we interact with one another. And that can be really powerful. It can also be really destructive. So obviously, I think that's a lot of us like to jump to the destructive side of it because that seems to be winning a lot. Oftentimes, that seems to be the more obvious thing. But I think it can be used in a powerful way for good as well.
Okay, potential power.
I think it's like anything else in culture. There are things that we have in culture that we, as Christians, can either accept, reject, or redeem. And there are certainly things that we have to reject. Sin, of course, outright. And there are things that have no moral value that we can accept. There are things that can be used for evil purposes that we can redeem and use for God-honoring purposes, and that certainly is redeemable. It's one of those things that Christians can choose to fall into true worldliness, pursuing the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and pride and possessions through social media, or they can be redeemed away from those things for a multitude of good reasons that would honor the Lord. And so it really, to me, is like anything else. Christians can either fall into that pattern of worldliness or redeem it for Christ.
Yeah, I love that idea, the hope of redeeming it, the idea, like you guys are both saying, of kind of being a light in what could and often is a really dark place. And I think Christians are called to be that light. I think social media is one of those things you could go either way. You could choose to reject it, and I think that'd be okay. But I also think there are those of us who are called to use it in some form or fashion, and hopefully to be a part of the redemption of it. And I like that idea.
So what would it look like for social media to show love for and support for a community? Like, how do we use it in a redeemed way? Like, functionally, what does that look like? Because you've got casual users like me who watch mountain bike videos and keep in touch with my mom on Facebook. I don't have a big social media presence. It's a very small window, but with someone, and even myself, as I hear the way you talked about that, Justin, I'm compelled to think about that. Maybe there are people like me who are going, hey, I might need to think about how I do this. So if we redeem it, how can it serve community, church, the gospel, these cultural issues? How does wisdom exercise its way through social media?
I think I can give you an example maybe of
that'd be great.
how it would play out. My social media, I don't like most of the content that I put out is kind of like what you were describing. It's like it's an article about like Ohio State football or whatever, a cooking thing or something like that. But I do speak into relevant topics like COVID and politics and stuff like that. And I try to do it in a way that is gentle but challenges people. So, like, I think a good example of that is just there are Christians in our community that need to be more aware of certain things, And so I have tried to gently put those, just create awareness around those topics in a good way. And what I've found is that people have responded to that. Like people are like, oh, like I might get a private message. That was a really cool video that you shared. I have a lot of things to think about. Like someone actually sent that to me within the last month. So moments like that, it's like I am helping my brothers and sisters become more aware of things that maybe they just never had to think about because like of the family they were born into or the economic system, whatever it may be. And it helps people kind of take things more seriously that might be blind spots.
Yeah, I think that's good. I think it is hard. It's a hard job. I mean, it's hard to be kind of light and on Facebook and social media, and so I run a business that is predominantly social media, and it's a big part of what it's feeding my kids dinner at night, and so I have a pretty consistent love-hate relationship with it, honestly, because the negative sides, the time consumption of it, and also just I don't know. It can just be heavy. Like you can, and I think that the Travelers Rest Here business part that I'm running, obviously it's not a political business, and I'm working hard to promote the town and businesses in the town. And so in one sense, it's easy to just promote those good things. And what I found too with the promotion of the good things in TR is, like you said, it is a very quick positive response. I think people do respond well to things that are hopeful and encouraging. And I don't think it's like a lollipop, kind of encouraging. Like I think it has substance, and I think that matters. I don't think it can just be like a thumbs up and a smile, like pretending the world isn't what it is. But I think finding the things that are hopeful and pointing those out, and then also not engaging in some of the, it's a small town, and whatever you're talking, whatever it is you're promoting, there can be people responding strongly in any direction, of course. But I think sometimes I will choose as a business to not engage with certain topics, and whether that's for safety of the brand or whether that's because it's just I don't want to get engaged in that. But I do think I've had the most positive responses from positive posts, from things that are uplifting and pointing out this good thing, and I think people really are encouraged to see something hopeful, and that's not necessarily light, but is hopeful. I think it's been helpful.
So, if I can get you guys to kind of, we'll step out of talking about social media and kind of think from a wisdom end. We've got an audience of people who are listening to us. Off the top of our heads, what are kind of some specific wisdom principles? And at some point, we would love these to be grounded in God's word. But what are specific things that either you think about or come to your heart that you're burdened that people should think about as they approach social media and posting and engaging in conversations and or debate or serious discussion on those platforms? Like if we could just almost like popcorn popping, just give as many little, I would think about this, I would think about this, I would think about this. Wisdom would have you think this. Let's see if we can kind of do that as a gift for the people listening. Like what are things that come to your mind in that realm?
Peter said on Sunday, he mentioned the meekness of wisdom, and that's that idea of strength under control or gentleness. It's not weakness, but it's meekness, it's gentleness. And of course, Jesus just exemplified that. And I that's what I think of. I think of gentleness affecting even how we approach and put things on social media. What does meekness or strength under control or gentleness, how does that shape that kind of thing? I think that'd be a good thing to think about.
Good.
I think of, I don't remember what series it was. We went through a series recently at North Hills, like last 10 years. And the topic of truth and love kept coming up.
Yep.
So holding to truth, but you're speaking truth in love to people.
What does that specifically look like in a comment? Because I think we've all seen the opposite, right? So what does that look like in a comment with someone that you disagree with? What does speaking truth and love look like?
I think Oh man, that's a good question.
It's hard.
It's fine. You have to be very, very careful when it's written, like when it's on a screen and it's words and it's not actually coming out of your mouth. You have to watch out for it even more, basically. Like you have to be extra careful to make sure that what you're writing is clearly coming out of love. By the way, I'm not saying this like I've got it, like I've got this down, because I clearly this is something that takes intentionality, like we talked about earlier. But I think you can politely and lovingly disagree with someone and not, back down from like essential truth, but do it in a way that is calm and loving, even if they're being very, very obviously unloving.
Right.
So it's not like, don't use an exclamation point, use a period instead. It's not something like that, but you just have to have very, very focused intentionality. I don't know if that answered your question, but.
Yeah, I wasn't like, I didn't have something in mind. I don't know, but yeah, it is. And I think sometimes too, it involves some things that you don't do. I think we talked about this at the beginning, but like on these comments, and we're talking specifically about Facebook, you don't attack the person. I think we see a lot of that. And I think sometimes, unfortunately, it's easier to say the things you shouldn't do than the things that you should do. It's harder to find that.
Yeah, to reference back to the David French paradigm that Peter showed, we can communicate that we really do believe all those bad things about you. We can do that in written form, or we can not, and communicate written that while I'm disagreeing with the position, I'm not attacking the person. And that can make a big difference, I think. I've seen that. All the bad that's on social media and all the ranting and raving and knee-jerk responses. I've seen some really great examples of recently of Christians disagreeing with something somebody else posted or put on there, but doing it in such a way that affirms that person's relationship with the Lord and doesn't attack the person, but just really affirms, hey, I'm disagreeing on the application of this, but not attacking you as a person. And I've been pleased and to hear the Christian love even in the middle of disagreement.
Anything else? I'll throw in a couple here. They're actually based on yours that I think with some of this discussion about what we do online, it's interesting how much the scriptures talk about being timely with our words. And it's in both testaments, Old Testament and New Testament. Proverbs says, a word fitly spoken is like an apple of gold in a frame of silver. Fitly, appropriate, timing. Ephesians 4:29, let no corrupt communication come out of your mouth, which isn't swearing. It's words that hurt or cause rot. Let no corrupt communication come out of your mouth, but only that which builds up at the proper time. So if I was to say something about wisdom and social media and interacting on particular issues or discussions, it's just asking, is this timely? I don't have to say this. I actually think it's very, very rare that you have to say something on social media. That's just an opinion. Take it for what it's worth. I think there are people who have great faith in calling and recognize their power to be on social media. I've had that discussion with one lady in our church, totally believe her. But none of us have to. If we do, there has to be, and this is kind of where I would connect it. I hope our interactions online are full of faith. Like, I'm not just doing this because it's there. No, I'm going to engage in a difficult conversation with a sense of faith that I need to, that I'm called to. And if I don't, then if I really love this person, what I might need to do is just message them and say, hey, I'd love to take you out to lunch. So you can see my face, hear my voice, and we can dialogue, because I actually have a concern. But that context isn't where I need to do it. So, sorry, Tyler. So my input on that would just be to highlight timing and faith And then as a final wisdom source, if you read through Proverbs beginning to end, go through with a highlighter, highlight everything that it says about words, and you will be stunned. It's everywhere, all over the place. Our words matter. They are, it is the wildest thing. Our words are incarnational. Jesus became the Word. We read the Word, and we have the power of words just like God had the power of words. We get to speak into. And Proverbs says, life and death is in the power of the tongue. You have the incarnational power to give life, and you have the death-reducing power to kill somebody with your tongue. So I would just ask us to consider what wisdom would say about our words, even in an online context. Just as a helpful guide, this past week, Peter announced that a member of our church, Steve Kaminsky, he actually preached our first week of Serpents and Doves series. He put together a tips for serpent doves in a media age, and that is available on our website. Is that accurate, Justin?
Yes. Right now it's on the homepage of the website,
Yep.
and also on the sermon page for that sermon. So if you go to Sermons and Media, and then you just look at the most recent sermon, it'll be there as well.
And I found it really helpful. I read through it. So hopefully that'll be another resource for you as we attempt to be serpents and doves, both in politics and on social media. Next week's sermon, actually this coming Sunday's sermon, we're going to deal with heavenly wisdom and racial tension. Peter's going to be preaching this Sunday. We want to answer any questions that you may have. So this Sunday, you'll have an opportunity to text in or email questions. There'll be a slide up. Those of you who watch online, same thing will happen. You could text those in or email Justin at northhillschurch.com. We want to be able to engage more on that issue next week. So keep following along with this podcast. And thank you for listening.